I was just fixing some plumbing, that's all it was supposed to be. Simple afternoon job, maybe 2 hours max, then home to my leftover pizza and whatever game was on TV. But sometimes life has other plans, and sometimes those plans involve a 51-year-old woman named Grace Whitman asking you to stay for dinner because she has something urgent to tell you. Something that would turn my quiet Tuesday into the beginning of the most complicated. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Beautiful and terrifying few months of my life. The morning started ordinary enough. My alarm didn't go off because I'd forgotten to plug in my phone again. So I woke up to my neighbor's dog barking at what I assume was either a squirrel or the existential dread we all carry. Coffee that tasted like it had been filtered through regret, a piece of toast that I burned while checking my email, and my mom's third voicemail this week about why I haven't called her back. Classic Tuesday. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. But in my line of work, unknown numbers usually mean money, so I answered, "Is this Oliver Brown?" The voice was warm, slightly nervous, with the kind of careful politeness that suggested she'd been rehearsing this call. "That's me. Oliver Brown, handyman extraordinaire, solver of household mysteries, an occasional witness to domestic chaos." She laughed, a real laugh, not the polite kind. "Perfect. I'm Grace Whitman. I live on Maple Ridge Drive, and I have a plumbing situation that's somewhere between annoying and catastrophic." I grabbed my notepad, already mentally calculating drive time and parts. What kind of situation are we talking about? Dripping faucet or indoor swimming pool? "Well," she said, and I could hear her moving around. It's probably looking at whatever disaster was unfolding in her house. My kitchen sink decided to become a fountain this morning. Not the decorative kind, the kind that makes you question your life choices and wonder if your homeowner's insurance covers acts of domestic rebellion. I liked her immediately, not in a romantic way, just in that rare way you sometimes connect with a complete stranger who speaks your language. The language of things breaking at the worst possible moment and finding humor in small disasters. "I can be there in an hour," I said, already reaching for my tool bag. Fair warning, though, plumbing and I have a complicated relationship. It listens to me. Sometimes it laughs in my face. As long as you can make it stop turning my kitchen into a water park, I'll consider you a miracle worker. Maple Ridge Drive turned out to be one of those streets where every house looks like it was designed by someone who really believed in the American dream. Big yards, white picket fences, and the kind of neighborhood where people actually know each other's names. I found 247 easily enough. It was the one with a woman standing in the driveway, wringing her hands and staring at her front door like it might explode. Grace Whitman was exactly what I'd pictured, and nothing like I'd expected. At the same time, tall, maybe 5'7", with silver-streaked brown hair pulled back in a messy ponytail that suggested she'd been dealing with plumbing emergencies all morning. She wore jeans that had seen some real work and a blue flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing arms that clearly weren't afraid of hard labor. But it was her face that struck me open, intelligent, with laugh lines around green eyes that seemed to be perpetually amused by something. She looked like someone who'd lived a full life and wasn't afraid to show it. "Oliver," she called as I got out of my truck, "the one and only. Though if this goes badly, I might have to change my name and move to another state." She grinned and walked over, extending a hand that was firm and calloused. Real hands, like my mom always said. Hands that worked for a living and weren't ashamed of it. "Grace Whitman, thank you for coming so quickly. I was starting to think I'd have to learn to live with a kitchen waterfall. Let's take a look at the damage. Fair warning, I tend to talk to pipes like they're misbehaving children. It's weird, but it works." She led me toward the house, and I couldn't help but notice the yard. Someone cared about this place. The lawn was well maintained without being obsessive. There were flower beds that showed planning and attention, and a vegetable garden that looked like it actually produced food instead of just existing for show. This was a home, not just a house. "You garden?" I asked, nodding toward the neat rows of what looked like tomatoes and peppers. Guilty, it's therapeutic. Plus, store-bought tomatoes taste like disappointment with a side of chemicals. The kitchen was a disaster. Not a dirty disaster, just a wet one. Water covered most of the floor, and I could hear the steady sound of more water hitting more water somewhere under the sink. But despite the chaos, the kitchen itself was warm and inviting. Mismatched but cheerful dishes, herbs growing in small pots on the windowsill, and the kind of lived-in feeling that comes from someone who actually cooks instead of just reheating things. How long has it been doing this? I asked, already getting down on my knees to look under the sink. Started around 7 this morning. I woke up to what I thought was rain, but then I realized it was Tuesday and the forecast was clear. I pulled out my flashlight and peered into the cabinet. The problem was obvious. A connection had come loose, probably from age, and the kind of settling that happens in houses that have seen a few decades. Simple fix, maybe 30 minutes if I was being pessimistic. Good news and bad news, I said. Sitting back on my heels. Good news is it's fixable, probably within the hour. Bad news is, whoever installed this originally had a very creative relationship with standard plumbing practices. Creative how? Let's just say they used duct tape, where they should have used actual pipe fittings. Which explains why it lasted 15 years before failing spectacularly. Grace laughed, a sound that filled the kitchen despite the ongoing water situation. Sounds about right. This house has a lot of creative solutions. Previous owner was apparently very confident in his DIY abilities and very wrong about most of them. As I worked, she stayed nearby, not hovering, but available, occasionally handing me tools or asking questions about what I was doing. It was comfortable in a way that surprised me. Usually homeowners either disappear completely or stand over me, making nervous comments about every move I make. Grace found the middle ground, interested, but not intrusive, helpful, but not anxious. You've been doing this long? She asked, as I tightened the final connection. About 8 years. Started right after college when I realized my business degree was worth slightly less than the paper it was printed on. Turns out people always need things fixed, and there's something satisfying about solving problems you can actually solve. I get that. I used to be a social worker. 23 years of trying to fix things that sometimes couldn't be fixed. Retirement forced me to find new purposes. There was something in her voice when she said that, a small catch that suggested retirement hadn't been entirely voluntary. But before I could think too much about it, the water stopped running. There we go, I said, standing up and brushing off my knees. One kitchen fountain converted back into a normal sink. Give it a few minutes to dry out, but you should be good to go. Grace turned on the faucet, and water came out exactly where it was supposed to, in exactly the amount it was supposed to. She clapped her hands together like I'd just performed actual magic. You're hired for life, she said. Seriously, I was starting to research houseboats. I packed up my tools, trying not to notice how comfortable I felt in her kitchen, how easy she was to talk to, how the whole house felt like the kind of place where people actually lived instead of just existed. It had been a long time since I'd been in a space that felt so much like a home. What do I owe you? She asked as I shouldered my tool bag. I quoted my standard rate, expecting the usual negotiation or surprise at the cost. Instead, she nodded and went to get her checkbook. No questions asked. You know, she said as she wrote out the check, I've been meaning to ask someone about the bathroom upstairs. The shower has this quirk where it goes from Arctic to scalding with no warning. Think that's something you could look at sometime? Probably a mixing valve issue. It's pretty common in houses this age. I could take a look next week if you want. She handed me the check, and our fingers brushed for just a moment. Her hands were warm, and I found myself wondering what it would be like to hold them properly, which was a dangerous thought for a Tuesday afternoon. Actually, she said, and something in her tone made me look up from the check I was about. To start dinner, nothing fancy, just pasta and whatever I can find in the garden. You're welcome to stay if you'd like. I mean, if you don't have other plans. It was a simple invitation, the kind neighbors make to helpful strangers. But something in her eyes suggested it was more than that, and something in my chest responded before my brain could catch up. I'd like that, I heard myself saying. I mean, if you're sure it's not too much trouble, no trouble at all. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, Subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Actually, she paused, looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. There's something I need to tell you, something urgent, and I think I'd rather not be alone when I say it. The words hung in the air between us like smoke from a fire you can't quite locate. Something urgent. It's the way she said it. Not dramatic, not desperate. It's just matter of fact. With an undercurrent of fear made my stomach do something uncomfortable. I said slowly, setting my tool bag down by the kitchen door. Should I be worried? Like call the police worried? Or more like call a therapist worried? She laughed, but it came out shaky. Neither, maybe both. I honestly don't know anymore. She ran her hands through her hair, disturbing the ponytail and making her look younger somehow. I'm sorry. I'm not usually this cryptic. It's just ... It's been a long few months, and I haven't had anyone to talk to about this. Why don't you start dinner? I suggested. Sometimes it's easier to talk while your hands are busy. She nodded and moved toward the refrigerator with purpose. I leaned against the counter, close enough to be supportive, but far enough away to not feel intrusive. The late afternoon sun streamed through the kitchen window, making everything feel warm and golden despite the tension. I moved here 6 months ago, she said, pulling vegetables from the crisper drawer. From Portland, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. She set tomatoes, basil, and fresh mozzarella on the counter, then paused with her hands flat against the marble surface. Her shoulders were tight like she was bracing herself. Grace, I said gently, whatever it is, you don't have to tell me. If you're not ready... She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes that I recognized. It was the same look my sister Kelly had when she finally told us about her ex-husband's drinking problem. The look of someone who's been carrying a secret so long it's become part of their posture. I think I do need to tell someone, she said. Quietly. I used to work for the Department of Children and Families. Child Protective Services. 23 years of removing kids from dangerous situations, trying to reunite families. She started slicing tomatoes with careful precision. I was good at my job. Really good. I had one of the highest success rates in the state for family reunification. I believed in the system, believed that most people could change if they had the right support. She set down the knife and finally looked at me. 6 months ago, I made a mistake. A big one. A 15-year-old girl named Emma Clive was removed from her home because of suspected abuse. Her stepfather was a respected member of the community, owned a construction company, donated to local charities. Her mother was dependent on him financially and emotionally. Grace moved to the stove and started heating olive oil in a pan. The evidence was there, but it was subtle. Bruises that could be explained away, behavioral changes that could be attributed to normal teenage rebellion, a girl who was too scared to tell the whole truth. She added garlic to the pan, and the smell filled the kitchen. I recommended she be returned home after the stepfather completed anger management classes, and the family agreed to regular check-ins. Standard protocol when the evidence is circumstantial, but the family seems committed to change. 3 weeks later, Emma was in the hospital with a concussion, 2 broken ribs, and internal bleeding. She almost died. Her voice was steady, but I could see her hands shaking slightly. The stepfather had been escalating the abuse, and the mother had been helping cover it up. Grace, I said firmly, the people who hurt her put her in that situation. You were trying to help? She shook her head. I should have seen it. I should have trusted my instincts instead of following protocol. I had this feeling, this nagging doubt, but I ignored it because the evidence wasn't conclusive enough. Pasta water was boiling now, and she added the spaghetti with mechanical precision. Investigation, review board, media attention. Emma's story made the news. Respected businessman abuses stepdaughter, while social worker ignores warning signs. I became the face of a failed system. I was cleared of any legal wrongdoing technically. I had followed all the proper procedures. But I was reassigned to a desk job, then encouraged to take early retirement. The department needed someone to blame, and I was convenient. She drained the pasta and started assembling our plates. The worst part is, I don't disagree with them. I should have fought harder for Emma, and now, I asked, where is she now? Grace paused, a forkful of pasta halfway to her mouth. It's the urgent thing I need to tell you. Emma is here. With me. She's been living in my guest room for the past 3 months. The kitchen went quiet, except for the sound of our breathing and the distant hum of the refrigerator. Outside, I could hear normal suburban sounds that felt surreal given what she'd just told me. Her stepfather was arrested and charged, but he made bail. The mother blamed Emma for destroying the family and refused to support her. Emma was placed in foster care, but she ran away twice. The third time she called me, so you took her. In illegally, yes. I'm not a licensed foster parent anymore, and I definitely don't have permission from the state to house a minor. But she had nowhere else to go, and after what I'd put her through, ... double quotes, Grace set down her fork and looked at me directly. I couldn't let the system fail her again. The weight of what she was telling me settled over the kitchen like a heavy blanket. This wasn't just about guilt or career consequences. Grace had essentially kidnapped a minor from state custody, even if her motives were pure. Where is she now? Asked. At the library. She goes there every day after school, stays until they close, says it's the only place that feels safe. Grace twisted her napkin in her hands. She should be home soon, actually, around 6:30. Oh, I checked my watch, 6:15. Oliver, Grace said, and her voice was smaller now, more vulnerable. I need you to know what you're walking into if you stay. Mom is brilliant and brave and funny, but she's also traumatized and angry and suspicious of every adult who tries to help her. And legally speaking, what I'm doing could land me in jail. And what happens if you get caught? Emma goes back into the system, probably to a group home since her foster placements didn't work out. I go to prison for kidnapping and interfering. With a custody order, she met my eyes again. But here's the thing. I can't let that happen to her. Not again. The front door opened before I could respond, and we both froze. Footsteps in the hallway, quick and light. Grace, a young voice called. Whose truck is in the driveway? Grace's eyes met mine, and I saw everything there. Fear, hope, desperation, and a fierce protectiveness that reminded me why I'd liked her so much in the first place. In the kitchen, Grace called back. I have someone I'd like you to meet. Emma Clive appeared in the kitchen doorway like a cautious cat, ready to bolt at the first sign of danger. She was small for 15, maybe 5'2", with dark hair that fell across her face in a way that seemed intentional, like she was used to hiding behind it. She wore jeans with holes that looked earned rather than fashionable, an oversized flannel shirt, and a backpack that looked like it had seen several lifetimes of use. But it was her eyes that got me, dark brown, alert, and old, in a way that made my chest ache. These were eyes that had seen too much and trusted too little. Ma'am, this is Oliver Brown, Grace said, her voice carefully casual. He fixed our kitchen sink today. Emma's gaze flicked between Grace and me, taking inventory. She noticed my tool bag by the door, the slight dampness still on the kitchen floor, the way Grace was standing just a little too straight. You're the plumber, Emma said. It wasn't a question. Handyman, technically, I replied. Though today, I played plumber, therapist to angry pipes, and apparently dinner guest. A ghost of a smile crossed Emma's face. Did they listen to you? The pipes, I mean. Eventually, though I think they were just tired of arguing. She set her backpack down by the kitchen table, but kept her distance from both of us. Grace doesn't usually have people over for dinner. Actually, Grace doesn't have anyone over, ever. In 3 months, you're the first person who's been in this house besides me and her. The observation hung in the air, and I realized Emma was testing me. Not just checking me out, but actively trying to figure out if I was a threat, an opportunity, or just another adult who would disappoint her. Well, I said, I'm honored to break the streak, though I should warn you I'm probably going to embarrass myself by saying something awkward about teenagers. Emma actually smiled at that, just a little. Most adults do. Grace had been watching this exchange like a tennis match, and I could see the relief in her shoulders when Emma didn't immediately retreat to her room. Are you hungry? Enough pasta for 3? I ate at the library, Emma said automatically, then caught herself. I mean, I had a granola bar. I could probably eat some pasta. While Grace fixed Emma a plate, I found myself studying the girl's mannerisms, the way she positioned herself near the exit, how she kept her backpack within arm's reach, the automatic deflection about having already eaten. These were the habits of someone who'd learned not to depend on anyone for anything. "How's Mrs. Patterson today?" Grace asked as she set the plate in front of Emma. She asked me to help with the card catalog again. "I think she makes up work for me to do because she knows I don't want to go home." Emma caught herself again, glancing at me. "Here, I don't want to come here yet." "It's okay," Grace said softly. "Oliver knows." Emma's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "Knows what, exactly?" The question was directed at me, and I could see the challenge in her eyes. This was the real test. "I know that you're staying with Grace temporarily," I said carefully. "And I know that the situation is complicated." Complicated. Emma set down her fork. "That's one way to put it. Grace is harboring a fugitive from the foster care system. That would be me. She could go too. Jail for it. Could get sent back to people who don't want me. So if you're thinking about calling anyone official, you should probably do it now." The directness of it was startling, but also impressive. Emma had learned to control the narrative of her own story, to present the worst-case scenario up front, so she couldn't be surprised by it later. "I wasn't planning on calling anyone," I said, "but I appreciate you being straight with me. Most adults aren't okay with law-breaking, even when it's for a good cause. Most adults haven't met you yet." Emma studied my face like she was trying to solve a puzzle. "Grace says you have sisters. 3 of them. 2 older, 1 younger. 2. They trust you?" It was an odd question, but I could tell it mattered. "Yeah, I think so. My sister Kelly calls me when her husband's being an idiot. My sister Priscilla asks me to babysit her kids when she needs a break. And my youngest sister, Felicia, still asks me to check under her bed for monsters, even though she's 22. You check under the bed for monsters for a 22-year-old? Every time I visit, you'd be surprised how many monsters can accumulate under there." This time, Emma's smile was real, reaching her eyes. "That's either really sweet or really weird." "Not both?" We ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, and I found myself relaxing in a way I hadn't expected. There was something about the dynamic between Grace and Emma that felt right. Not like a social worker in her charge, but like family. Complicated, cautious family, but family nonetheless. "So what else is broken around here?" I asked eventually. "Besides everything," Emma said, but she was smiling again. Grace laughed. "The bathroom upstairs has some issues. The shower goes from ice cold to surface of the sun, hot with no warning. And there's a loose banister on the staircase. The guest room window sticks," Emma added. "Sometimes I can't get it open," I noticed. How she called it the guest room, not her room. Still keeping distance, still ready to leave. "I could take a look at those things this week," I offered. "We can't really afford to have you here every day," Grace said carefully. "Who said anything about charging you? Consider it community service." Emma was watching this exchange with interest. "Why would you do work for free?" "Because sometimes fixing things is its own reward. And because Grace makes really good pasta." After dinner, Emma disappeared upstairs to do homework, leaving Grace and me to clean up. We worked in comfortable rhythm, not talking much, but that silence felt companionable rather than awkward. "She likes you," Grace said as she dried a plate. "She's cautious. That's smart. It's necessary." Emma's been let down by a lot of adults who started out seeming trustworthy. I rinsed a glass and handed it to her, including you. Grace paused in her drying. I let her down before I ever met her, by sending her back to people who hurt her. Now you're trying to make up for it. I'm trying to do what I should have done the first time, protect her. As I reached the front door, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Emma appeared, now wearing pajama pants and an oversized t-shirt. "Oliver?" she called softly. I turned back. "She stays up late reading case files and legal websites, trying to figure out how to make this all work legally." Emma's voice was matter of fact, but I could hear the concern underneath. "I thought you should know." It was a remarkably mature observation from someone who was supposed to be the one being taken care of. "I'll keep that in mind," I said. Emma nodded and started back upstairs, then paused. "Oliver, thanks for not freaking out about everything." Thanks for giving me a chance not to. After Emma disappeared, Grace and I stood in the hallway for a moment. She's protective of you, I observed. She thinks she needs to take care of me. I've been trying to convince her that it's supposed to work the other way around. Maybe it works both ways. Grace looked at me thoughtfully. You really meant what you said about coming back to fix things. I meant it. Grace's eyes filled with tears she didn't let fall. I used to be so sure about the right reasons. Now I don't know anything except that Emma deserves better than the system has given her, and we'll figure out how to give her better. The word we hung between us. I realized I'd just committed myself to something much bigger than fixing a few household problems. I'll call you tomorrow, I said. About the shower. I left Grace's house that night with my head spinning and my heart doing something complicated in my chest. I'd gone there to fix a simple plumbing problem and somehow walked into the middle of a situation that could change all our lives. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was part of something. That mattered. I came back the next Thursday to fix the shower, but honestly, I'd been thinking about Grace and Emma all week. The way Emma had tested me without being obvious about it. The way Grace carried herself like she was holding the weight of the world but trying not to let it show. The morning was crisp. One of those early October days that makes you believe in fresh starts. Grace met me at the door wearing paint-splattered jeans and a smile that seemed more relaxed than before. You came back, she said, and I caught something in her voice that might have been relief. I said I would. Plus, someone needs to save you from hypothermia or third-degree burns every time you shower. The bathroom was small but functional, with subway tiles that had seen better decades and a clawfoot tub that was probably original to the house. Grace stood in the doorway while I examined the shower fixtures, close enough to talk but far enough, a way to give me room to work. Emma's at school? I asked, testing the water temperature controls. Yeah, but she asked me to tell you that she researched shower valve repair on YouTube last night. Apparently she wanted to be helpful in case you needed a 15-year-old consultant. I smiled, already picturing Emma hunched over a laptop, taking notes on plumbing techniques. She strikes me as the type who researches everything. It's a control thing. If she understands how something works, she feels safer around it. Grace paused. She's been researching you too. I looked up from where I was crouched by the plumbing. Should I be worried? She Googled your business, found some customer reviews online, read them all to me over breakfast. Apparently Mrs. Henderson from Birch Street thinks you're prompt, professional, and surprisingly good at explaining things without being condescending. Mrs. Henderson is a tough critic. Her approval is worth its weight in pipe fittings. Grace laughed, and the sound filled the small bathroom in a way that made me realize how much I'd missed it. Emma was particularly impressed that you've never had a complaint about overcharging or doing unnecessary work. I started dismantling the shower valve, noting that the problem was exactly what I'd suspected, a worn mixing cartridge that probably hadn't been replaced in a decade. Emma's smart to be cautious. After what she's been through, checking up on people probably feels necessary. She's been let down by a lot of adults who seemed trustworthy at first. But she called you when she ran away from foster care. She called me because I was the only adult who'd ever apologized to her. After the review board, after the media attention died down, I went to see her in the hospital, sat by her bed and told her I was sorry. I should have done better. Should have protected her? What did she say? Nothing at first. Then she asked me if I thought she was broken. If what happened to her meant she'd never be normal? Grace's voice got smaller. I told her that trauma changes you, but it doesn't break you. That healing isn't about going back to who you were before. It's about becoming who you're meant to. Be next. I stopped working and looked at her. It's beautiful advice. It's advice I'm still trying to follow myself. We worked in comfortable quiet for a while, Grace handing me tools and asking questions about what I was doing. She was a good student, paying attention to the details, asking follow-up questions that showed she was actually listening. No, I said, as I installed the new cartridge. If you want to learn some basic home repair stuff, I could teach. You might be useful, living in a house this old. Would you really? I mean, I know you're busy with actual paying customers. Grace, you're feeding me dinner and trusting me with your biggest secret. Teaching you how to fix a leaky faucet is the least I can do. When I finished with the shower, I tested the temperature control. Perfect. No more Arctic surprises or accidental scalding. Grace tried it herself, her face lighting up like I'd just performed a miracle. "Emma's going to think you're a wizard," she said. We moved downstairs to look at the banister, which turned out to be a simple fix, just a few loose screws that needed tightening. While I worked, Grace made coffee and we talked about easier things. She told me about her garden plans for next spring, about the book she was reading, about how different it was living in a small town after 20 years in Portland. "Do you miss it?" I asked. "The city? Parts of it? The anonymity mostly? Here, everyone notices when you get a grocery delivery or when someone's truck is in your driveway." She handed me a mug of coffee that smelled incredible. "But Emma likes it here. She says it's the first place that's ever felt safe." Before I could respond, the front door opened, and Emma's voice echoed through the house. "Grace, is Oliver here? I can see his truck." Emma appeared a moment later, backpack slung over one shoulder, looking slightly windblown and more relaxed than she had the week before. "How'd the shower surgery go?" "Complete success." "No more temperature? Russian roulette? Excellent." I was getting tired of strategic bathing. She dropped her backpack by the table and looked at my coffee mug. Did Grace make the good coffee or the everyday coffee? "I didn't know there was a difference." "Oh, there's a difference," Emma said seriously. "Grace has this fancy coffee she only makes for special occasions or when she's really stressed about something." Grace rolled her eyes. "It's just beans from that place downtown. It's $12 pound coffee," Emma informed me. "Which means either you're special or Grace is having an anxiety spiral about something." I found myself grinning at the interplay between them. It felt like family. The teasing, the inside jokes, the way they understood each other's rhythms. Well, I'm honored either way. Emma went to the refrigerator and started pulling out ingredients. "I'm making grilled cheese for dinner. Fair warning, I have strong opinions about cheese selection and butter distribution. Should I be worried? Only. If you're one of those people who thinks American cheese belongs on grilled cheese sandwiches, what kind of monster do you take me for?" "Good answer." Emma began her sandwich assembly with the kind of focus usually reserved for surgical procedures. "Grace, did you tell him about Preston Scavo?" Grace went very still. "What about Preston Scavo?" I asked, looking between them. Emma continued buttering bread with methodical precision. "He's this guy who's been asking questions around town. About Grace, about me, about whether we're actually related." My stomach dropped. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that made the school secretary uncomfortable enough to call Grace and give her a heads up," Emma said matter-of-factly. "He told her he was a private investigator working on a family matter, but he was asking weird stuff, like how long I'd been enrolled, whether my medical records had been transferred from Portland, whether Grace had provided adequate documentation of guardianship." Grace had gone pale. I don't know if it's connected to Emma's case or if it's just someone fishing for information. "When did this happen?" I asked. "Yesterday," Emma replied. "Which is why Grace made the good coffee this morning." Stress indicator. The kitchen went quiet except for the sound of grilled cheese sizzling in the pan. Outside, a dog was barking, and someone was running a leaf blower. Normal suburban sounds that felt surreal against the weight of what we were discussing. "Okay," I said finally. "What do we do?" Emma looked up from the sandwiches. I repeated firmly. "You think I'm going to walk away now because things got complicated?" Grace's eyes filled with tears she didn't let fall. "Oliver, you don't understand what you'd be getting into. If Emma's right, if someone is looking for her, then we figure out how to protect her, both of you." Emma flipped the sandwiches with more force than necessary. "Most adults run when things get legally complicated. Most adults haven't met you two yet." For the first time since I'd met her, Emma looked like the 15-year-old she actually was. Young, scared, but trying. Hard not to show it. "You really mean that?" "I really mean that." She nodded once, then turned back to the stove.
"Good."
"Because I think we're going to need all the help we can get." The grilled cheese was perfect, crispy on the outside, melted to exactly the right consistency on the inside, with what Emma informed me was a carefully curated blend of sharp cheddar and Gruyere. For a 15-year-old, she took her sandwich engineering very seriously. But despite the comfort food and easy conversation, I could see the tension in both Grace and Emma's shoulders. The news about Preston Scavo had shaken them, and I found myself studying every car that passed by the kitchen window. "We need more information," I said finally. "About this investigator, about who hired him, about what exactly he's looking for." "How do we get that without tipping him off that we know he's asking questions?" Grace asked. "We ask the right people, the right questions," Emma said matter-of-factly. "Mrs. Patterson at the library knows everything that happens in this town. So does Mr. Whitman at the hardware store. And the secretary at school, Mrs. Brown, she's the one who called Grace." I looked at Emma with new respect. "You've been planning?" "Reconnaissance." "I've been planning survival," she corrected.
How?
"There's a difference." "My nephew Parker could help," I offered. "He's good with people, knows how to ask questions without seeming nosy. Plus, being a social work student gives him credibility." Grace hesitated. "Oliver, I don't want to drag more people into this." You're not dragging anyone. I'm volunteering, and Parker will too." Once I explained the situation, I had been listening with the kind of attention she usually reserved for. "Homework. What's your nephew like?" 21, studying at the State University.
Oh, smart.
Funny in a way that doesn't involve making fun of other people. He's the kind of person who volunteers at animal shelters and actually remembers your birthday." "Sounds too good to be true," Emma said, but she was smiling slightly. "He's also stubborn as hell when he thinks something's wrong, and he has zero patience for people who hurt kids." 2 hours later, Parker's beat-up Honda Civic pulled into Grace's driveway. Parker Brown was everything I'd told Grace and Emma he would be, tall and lanky. His dark hair that never quite stayed where it was supposed to, and a smile that made you want to trust him immediately. "You must be Grace," he said as she opened the front door. "I'm Parker. Uncle Oliver's told me a lot about you. All good things, I hope. Mostly just that you make excellent coffee and have been putting up with his questionable repair techniques." Emma appeared behind Grace, studying Parker with careful attention. "You're the social work student?" "Guilty, though I promise I'm not here in any official capacity. Just as someone who cares about what happens to you both." We gathered in Grace's living room, which I was seeing for the first time, was warm and lived in, with mismatched furniture that somehow worked perfectly together. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with professional texts and popular fiction. Emma had claimed one corner with a reading chair and a small table covered in library books and homework. "So," Parker said once we were all settled, "Uncle Oliver filled me in on the basic situation. You're protecting Emma from a system that failed her. Someone's asking questions. And you need to know what's going on without revealing that you know what's going on." "That's about the size of it," Grace said. "Okay? The key is to approach this from multiple angles. Make it seem like natural curiosity rather than targeted investigation." Emma leaned forward. "What kind of angles?" "I could visit the school. As a social work student doing research on educational support for at-risk youth, completely legitimate, and it gives me a reason to ask about unusual inquiries or concerns about student welfare." "That's actually brilliant," Grace said. Meanwhile, Parker continued. "Oliver could make some casual visits to local businesses. Maybe ask about new security concerns in the neighborhood. People love to gossip about suspicious activity. I could just pay attention at the library," Emma added. "Mrs. Patterson tells me everything anyway. If someone's been asking about us, she'll probably bring it up on her own." Parker nodded approvingly. "Exactly. We gather information separately, compare notes, and hopefully get a clearer picture of what we're dealing with." "What if it's worse than we think?" Grace asked quietly. "Then we deal with it," Parker said firmly. "Grace, you did the right thing, protecting Emma. Sometimes the system fails, and sometimes good people have to work outside it to keep kids safe." "You really believe that?" Emma asked. "Even though you're studying to work within the system?" Parker was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "I believe the system can be a powerful tool for protecting children when it works correctly. But I also believe that individual people have a responsibility to do what's right, even when the system fails." I watched Grace's face as Parker spoke, seeing some of the tension leave her shoulders. This was what she'd needed to hear, that she wasn't crazy or wrong for choosing Emma's safety over legal procedures. "Okay," Grace said finally. "Let's do this, but carefully. If this Preston Scavo is any good at his job, he'll notice if suddenly. Everyone in town is asking questions." Emma had been quiet during this exchange, but now she looked up at Parker. "Why are you helping us? You don't even know me." "Because Oliver trusts you both enough to get involved, and I trust Oliver. Because Grace spent her career trying to protect kids, and now she's protecting you when no one else will. And because every kid deserves to have adults who will fight for them." Something in Emma's expression shifted, a small crack in the careful armor she wore. "Most people wouldn't take this kind of risk for a stranger." "You're not a stranger anymore," Parker said simply. "You're family." The word hung in the air, and I saw tears gather in Grace's eyes that she didn't let fall. Emma looked down at her hands, processing. "Family?" she repeated quietly. "The best kind," I added. "The kind you choose." After Parker left that evening, with a plan for the next few days, Grace and I sat on her front porch while Emma did homework inside.
Oh.
The October air was crisp, and the neighborhood was settling into its evening rhythm. "Parker's wonderful," Grace said. "He reminds me of why I got into social work in the first place. He has that effect on people. Makes you want to be better than you are." Grace was quiet for a moment, watching a neighbor walk their dog under the streetlights. "Oliver, what are we doing here? Really?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, this isn't just about fixing plumbing anymore. You and Parker are risking a lot to help us, and I keep wondering what happens when this is over, one way or another." I'd been wondering the same thing, but I wasn't ready to examine those thoughts too closely. "I guess we'll figure that out when we get there. And if we get caught, if Emma gets taken away and I go to jail, then we'll figure that out too." Grace turned to look at me, her green eyes serious in the porch light. "You realize you could walk away from this any time. Emma and I would understand. This isn't your responsibility." "Maybe not," I said, "but it's my choice." It was a fair question, and one I'd been avoiding asking myself. Why was I willing to risk so much for two people I'd known for less than 2 weeks? "Because," I said finally, "for the first time in a long time, I feel like what I'm doing actually matters. Not just fixing broken pipes or wobbly banisters, but helping fix something that's genuinely important." Grace nodded slowly. "Emma matters. Both matter." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the neighborhood. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle blew. I found myself thinking about journeys and destinations and how sometimes the most important trips are the ones you never planned to take. Grace reached over and took my hand, squeezing it gently. Her fingers were warm and steady, and I realized that somewhere over the past 2 weeks, this had stopped being about helping a neighbor and started being about protecting the people I was falling in love with, both of them. In different ways. The thought should have scared me. Instead, it felt like coming home the next morning. I woke up to my phone buzzing at 6:47 a.m. Grace's name on the screen sent my heart rate spiking before I was even fully awake. "Oliver?" Her voice was tight, controlled in a way that immediately told me something was wrong. "What happened?" "Someone was in our backyard last night, around 3 a.m. Emma heard footsteps and woke me up. By the time we looked out the window, whoever it was had gone, but there were cigarette butts by the back fence. Fresh ones. I was already reaching for my jeans. "Did you call the police?" "And tell them what?" "That too, people living under assumed identities think someone might have been watching their house." "I'm coming over," I said, already heading for my truck. "Make coffee. The good kind." When I arrived 20 minutes later, I found both women in the kitchen, still in their pajamas, but wide awake. Emma was staring out the back window with hypervigilance, while Grace paced like a caged animal. At the back fence, I found 3 cigarette butts ground into the dirt. Marlboro Reds, barely smoked, like whoever had been there was too nervous to finish them. From that spot, you could see directly into the kitchen and most of the living room. "How long do you think they were there?" I asked. Emma said she heard footsteps for at least 10 minutes before she woke me up. And the cigarettes suggest they were there longer than that. Oh. Back inside, Emma looked at me with eyes that were too old for her face. "I've been thinking about what this means. If someone was watching the house, if it's connected to Preston Scovo's questions, I'm thinking my stepfather found me. The words hung in the kitchen like a physical presence. Grace stopped pacing and came to stand behind Emma's chair, her hands resting protectively on the girl's shoulders. "We don't know that," Grace said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Grace," Emma said quietly, "you know as well as I do that this isn't random." Right. Private investigator asking questions. Now someone watching the house? He's building a case. "What kind of case?" I asked. "Either he's trying to prove that Grace is harboring a runaway so he can have her arrested and get me back, or he's trying to figure out the best way to get to me without involving the authorities." The second option made my blood run cold. "Emma, you don't think he'd try to hurt you, do you?" "I think he'd try to finish what he started," she said matter-of-factly. "And I think he's angry enough about the criminal charges and the publicity to want revenge." Grace's face had gone pale. "We need to leave today." "Where?" Emma asked. "Grace, he has resources. Money, connections, probably professional help now. Running just delays the inevitable." "Then what do you suggest?" Grace's voice was rising. The careful control she'd maintained for months finally starting to crack. "We fight back," Emma said simply. I found myself studying this 15-year-old girl who was discussing her own stalking with the calm analysis of a military strategist. What does fighting back look like? It looks like getting ahead of his narrative. If he's building a case that Grace kidnapped me, we need to build a better case that Grace saved me. Emma turned to Grace. "You still have contacts in the system, right? What about Dr. Sarah Clive? She testified at my stepfather's bail hearing about my injuries. She's not just any doctor. She's the head of pediatric trauma at Portland General." Grace went very still. "Emma, Dr. Clive is ... my biological father's sister," Emma finished. "I know. She'd been trying to get custody of me since the abuse. Came to light, but the courts won't consider her because she lives out of state, and I barely know her, but she's family. Real family," I said. "Real family who happens to be one of the most respected child trauma specialists on the West Coast," Emma said. "If she were willing to vouch for Grace's decision to protect me, if she could provide documentation of my stepfather's ongoing threats, that could change everything." Grace was shaking her head. "Emma, Dr. Clive barely knows you. She'll risk her career to help us," because Emma said, her voice getting smaller. "When I was in the hospital, she came to see me every day. She held my hand when I had nightmares. She was the one who explained to me what the surgeries were for, why I needed them. She was the only person who treated me like I mattered." Tears were running down Emma's face now, the first time I'd seen her cry. She gave me her card before I was discharged, told me that if I ever needed anything at all, I should call her. She said family takes care of family, even when they don't know each other very well. Grace knelt down beside Emma's chair, pulling the girl into a hug. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "'Cause I was scared," Emma whispered. "What if she changed her mind? What if she decided I was too much trouble? What if she tried to take me away from you, and now?" I asked gently. Emma pulled back from Grace, wiping her eyes. "Now I'm more scared of my stepfather finding me than I am of Dr. Clive disappointing me." Grace and I exchanged glances. This could be the break we needed. A legitimate family member with impeccable credentials willing to vouch for Grace's actions. But it was also a huge risk. "It's worth the risk," Grace said, reading my thoughts. "Emma's right. We can't keep running from this, and we can't handle it alone." "When's the last time you spoke to her?" I asked Emma. 3 months ago." "Right. Before I called Grace, what did you tell her then?" "That I was fine, that foster care was working out, that she didn't need to worry about me." "So she has no idea you've been living with Grace?" "No," I leaned back in my chair. "Okay, if we're going to do this, we need to do it right. We need to tell Dr. Clive everything, the truth about where Emma's been. Why Grace made the choice she did, what's happening now with the investigator." "What if she freaks out?" Emma asked. "Then we'll deal with that," Grace said firmly. "But Emma, you're right. We can't keep living like fugitives. Either we find a way to make this legal, or we accept that eventually we'll get caught. There's Something else, I said? If we're going to reach out to Dr. Clive, we need to do it soon. Before Preston Scavo figures out she exists and gets to her first, Emma nodded. I'll call her today. We'll call her today, Grace corrected. Together. I watched the two of them, seeing the fear and hope and determination in their faces, and felt something shift in my chest. This wasn't just about protecting Emma anymore or helping Grace navigate an impossible situation. This was about family. The kind of family you create when the world tries to tear apart the people you love. Whatever happens, I said, we face it together. All of us. Emma looked at me with eyes that were still wet from crying, but no longer seemed quite so young. Even if it gets really bad. Especially if it gets really bad. Grace reached across the table and took my hand, squeezing it gently. Oliver, you realize there's no going back from this? Once we involve Dr. Clive, once we start making official moves, we're committed. If this goes wrong, we'll figure out what comes next. But Grace, doing nothing isn't working anymore. Someone was in your backyard last night. Emma shouldn't have to live like this. None of us should, Emma said quietly. She was right. We'd been living in a kind of suspended animation, waiting for the other shoe to drop. But the world had found us anyway. Okay, Grace said, straightening her shoulders. Let's make the call. Dr. Sarah Clive answered on the third ring, her voice crisp and professional, despite the early hour on the West Coast. This is Dr. Clive. Emma's hand was shaking as she held the phone, Grace sitting close beside her for support. I could hear the conversation from across the kitchen table. The speaker turned up so we could all participate, Dr. Clive. This is Emma Clive, your brother's daughter. The silence stretched for what felt like hours. When Dr. Clive spoke again, her voice had completely changed, softer, warmer, filled with concern. Emma, oh my God, Emma, I've been so worried about you. Are you all right? Where are you? I lied, Emma said simply. I wasn't doing well. I was scared and I didn't want you to worry. But I also didn't want you to try to fix things because I thought it would just make everything worse. Sweetheart, where are you now? Are you safe? Emma looked at Grace, who nodded encouragingly. I'm safe, with someone who's been taking care of me. But we need help, and I think you might be the only person who can give it to us. The person I'm staying with is Grace Whitman. She used to be my social worker. Another pause, longer this time. I could practically hear Dr. Clive's medical mind working through the implications. Emma, she said carefully, are you saying that Ms. Whitman has had you in her care without official authorization? Yes, for 3 months. Grace took the phone. With hands that weren't quite steady, Dr. Clive, this is Grace Whitman. Before you say anything, I want you to know that I understand the legal implications of what I've done. But I also want you to know that Emma was in danger, and the system was failing her. Miss Whitman, I'm going to need you to explain exactly what happened. All of it. So Grace did. She told Dr. Clive about Emma's case, about the failed reunification, about the hospital visit, and Emma's question about whether she was broken. She explained about Emma running away from foster care, about the phone call that changed everything, about the decision to provide unofficial sanctuary. Dr. Clive listened without interrupting, occasionally asking for clarification, but mostly just absorbing the information. When Grace finished, the phone was quiet for a long moment. Miss Whitman, Dr. Clive said finally, what you're describing suggests that Emma's stepfather poses an ongoing threat. Do you have documentation of this? Grace explained about Preston Scavo, about the questions around town, about the cigarette butts in the backyard. With each detail, I could hear Dr. Clive's breathing become more focused, more clinical. This is very serious, she said when Grace finished. If Emma's stepfather has hired a private investigator, if someone was conducting surveillance on your home, Dr. Clive, Emma said, taking the phone back. I know this is a lot to ask. I know you barely know me, and I know what Grace did was illegal. But she saved my life. And now I think my stepfather might be getting close to finding me. Emma, sweetheart, listen to me. I've been trying to get custody of you since the day you were hospitalized. The courts wouldn't consider my petition because you were already in state care, and I live out of state. But if what you're telling me is true, if there's evidence that your stepfather is actively searching for you, ... what does that mean? It asked. It means, Dr. Clive said, that we might be able to make a case for emergency protective custody. If I can demonstrate that Emma faces imminent danger from her stepfather, and if I can show that the current arrangement with Ms. Whitman has provided stability and safety, Grace leaned forward. You'd be willing to testify on her behalf. Ms. Whitman, I'd be willing to do whatever it takes to protect Emma, but we need to do this correctly. If we're going to challenge the current system, we need documentation, evidence, and legal representation. I know a lawyer, I said suddenly. My sister, Priscilla's husband, Lance Whitman. He specializes in family law custody cases. Dr. Clive was thinking out loud now. If we can get an emergency hearing, if we can present evidence of the ongoing threat and testimony about Emma's stability in Ms. Whitman's care, ... What about the fact that what I did was illegal? Grace asked. Ms. Whitman, judges have discretion in cases involving child welfare. If we can show that your actions were motivated by Emma's safety, that they were necessary to prevent harm, that Emma has thrived in your care. It's not guaranteed, but it's possible. For the first time in weeks, I saw something that looked like hope in Grace's eyes. There's something else, Dr. Clive continued. I've been documenting my concerns about Emma's case since her hospitalization. I have records of my attempts to gain custody, communications with the state about my concerns, expert opinions about the psychological impact of returning Emma to her stepfather's influence. Dr. Clive, Emma said quietly, why are you willing to do this? You don't really know me. The pause this time was different, emotional rather than clinical. Emma, when your father died, I promised him I would look out for you if anything ever happened. I failed that promise when you were hurt, when the system I trusted let you down. I'm not going to fail it again. Emma started crying then, not the silent tears from earlier, but real sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her. Grace pulled her close, and I found myself looking away to give them privacy. What do we do now? Grace asked. Now, Dr. Clive said, we move fast. Ms. Whitman, I'm going to need copies of all your documentation. Oliver, can you contact your brother-in-law today? Emma, sweetheart, I'm going to need you to be brave a little while longer. I can do that, Emma said, wiping her eyes. There's one more thing, Dr. Clive said, her voice becoming serious again. If Emma's stepfather is as close as you think he is, we need to consider Emma's immediate safety. Ms. Whitman, do you have somewhere else you can take her? Somewhere he wouldn't think to look? Grace and I looked at each other. My mother's house. I said it's about an hour away, completely off the grid as far as Emma's case is concerned. She'd be safe there. Good. I want Emma somewhere secure while we file the paperwork. This could take a few days, and if this Preston Scavo reports, back to the stepfather. We'll leave today, Grace said, after we hung up with Dr. Clive. The three of us sat in the kitchen for a moment, processing what had just happened. In the span of one phone call, our entire situation had changed. We weren't hiding anymore. We were fighting back. Are you sure about your mother's house? Grace asked me. She's been asking to meet you both anyway. And trust me, anyone who tries to get past my mother to hurt Emma will regret it for the rest of their very short lives. Emma laughed despite everything. She sounds terrifying. She is. You'll love her. As we started planning the logistics of the move, my phone rang. Parker's name on the screen, Uncle Oliver. We've got a problem. I just left the school, and that secretary, Mrs. Brown, she said Preston Scavo was back this morning asking more questions. But here's the thing, he wasn't alone. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? He was with another guy. Bigger, angrier looking. And Mrs. Brown said they seemed less interested in gathering information and more interested in confirming it. I looked at Grace and Emma, both of whom had gone pale. Parker, we're leaving town. Right now. Can you meet us at my mother's house? Already on my way. Uncle Oliver. Whatever you're planning, do it fast. I don't think we have much time. As I hung up the phone, I realized that our quiet morning of making phone calls and planning legal strategies had just become a race against time. Emma's stepfather wasn't just looking for her anymore. He'd found her. The drive to my mother's house took 45 minutes of back roads and careful route changes to make sure we weren't being followed. Grace sat in the passenger seat with a duffel bag of essentials, while Emma curled up in the back with her backpack and a box of books she couldn't bear to leave behind. My mother, Kelly Brown, lived in a farmhouse that had been in our family for 3 generations. It sat on 12 acres of woods and fields, far enough from the main road that you couldn't see it from the street, with enough space around it that anyone approaching would be visible long before they reached the house. "Your mom knows we're coming?" Grace asked, as we turned into the long gravel driveway. "I called her from your house. Told her I was bringing some friends who needed a safe place to stay for a few days." She didn't ask questions. My mother appeared on the front porch before we'd even parked, wearing her usual uniform of jeans and a flannel shirt. At 62, Kelly Brown was the kind of woman who could deliver a calf, fix a tractor, and intimidate anyone foolish enough to threaten her family. "Oliver," she said, wrapping me in a hug that smelled like coffee and vanilla, "you look tired." She turned to Grace and Emma, her expression warming immediately. "You must be Grace, and this beautiful girl has to be Emma." Emma, who had been nervous about meeting my mother, relaxed visibly at the genuine warmth in Kelly's voice. "Thank you for letting us stay here, Mrs. Brown." "Kelly," my mother corrected. "Oliver told me you needed somewhere safe. That's all I need to know." As we carried bags into the house, Parker's Honda pulled into the driveway. He emerged looking grim, talking rapidly into his phone. "Lance, it's Parker Brown. I need to speak with you about an emergency custody situation." "Can you meet us today?" He paused, listening. "Yes, it's that urgent. Lance Whitman, Parker's brother-in-law, and my sister Priscilla's husband, was the kind of family lawyer who took on cases that mattered more than cases that paid well. We gathered in my mother's living room, comfortable space with overstuffed furniture and family photos covering every surface. Emma immediately gravitated toward the bookshelves, while Grace accepted a cup of coffee that my mother pressed into her hands without asking. "All right," Parker said, ending his call. "Lance is driving down from the city. He'll be here in 2 hours. In the meantime, we need to talk about what we learned this morning." Parker pulled out a notebook, flipping through pages of handwritten notes. "Mrs. Patterson at the library was very helpful. Apparently, Preston Scavo has been asking questions for over a week now. Not just about Grace and Emma, but about their daily routines, where Emma goes to school, what time Grace usually gets home from errands." Grace went pale. "That's not investigation. That's surveillance preparation." "It gets worse," Parker continued. "I managed to talk to the pharmacist, Mr. Scavo. Nice old guy, no relation to Preston despite the name. Said Preston and his associate came in yesterday asking about Emma's prescription history. Emma had gone very still by the bookshelf. He's building a case that I'm unstable. Grace has been medicating me to keep me compliant." My mother, who had been listening without comment, set down her coffee cup with a sharp clink. "The kind who doesn't want to go to prison for child abuse," Emma said quietly. Kelly's expression hardened. "Well, he picked the wrong family to threaten." Before anyone could ask what she meant, her landline phone rang. Kelly answered with a cautious hello. Her expression changed immediately. "I'm sorry, who is this?" A pause. "No, I don't know anyone by that name. You have the wrong number." She hung up and turned to us. "Someone asking if Grace Whitman was staying here. Said he was from the school district, calling about Emma's enrollment records." The room went silent. "They'd found us already?" Grace asked. "We were so careful." Parker was already pulling out his phone. "They probably tracked your cell. Phone signals from yesterday, when you called Dr. Clive from your house, when I called Lance from Grace's driveway. If they had the right equipment, ... My mother stood up. "No one is going anywhere. This is my property and I don't take kindly." 2 strangers making threatening phone calls. Kelly Grace said gently, "You don't understand what we're dealing with. These people are dangerous." "Sweetheart," my mother replied, her voice steel wrapped in velvet. "I've been dealing with dangerous men longer than you've been alive. My late husband taught me how to handle threats, and this old farmhouse has some advantages you might not be aware of." She walked to the front window and pointed to the long driveway. "Anyone coming up that drive? We see them coming for half a mile. The woods on 3 sides mean there's only one way in by vehicle, and ... She opened a closet door, revealing a gun safe. "I've got a hunting license," and 30 years of practice. Emma stared at my mother with something approaching awe. You're going to protect us, honey? Family protects family. It's what we do. Parker's phone buzzed with a text. Lance had read it and swore under his breath. Lance is here, but he says there's a car following him. Black sedan, tinted windows, staying about a quarter-mile back. Through the front window, we could see Lance's silver BMW turning into the driveway. And sure enough, a dark sedan that slowed but didn't turn in, continuing down the country road. They're not trying to hide anymore, Grace observed. Lance Whitman emerged from his car, looking every inch the successful family attorney. But his expression was grim as he approached the house. We've got problems, he announced without preamble, as my mother let him in. I did some checking on the way down here. Preston Scavo isn't just a private investigator. He's ex-military. Specializes in what he calls asset recovery, and his client isn't just Emma's stepfather. What do you mean? I asked. Lance set his briefcase down and pulled out a file folder. Emma's stepfather filed a civil lawsuit 3 months ago against the state, claiming they illegally removed Emma from his custody and that their negligence led to her disappearance. He's seeking damages and demanding Emma's immediate return. Grace sank into a chair. He's using the legal system to get her back. It's worse than that, Lance continued. The lawsuit names you specifically, Grace, as a defendant, claims you had improper contact with Emma, influenced her against her family, and may have assisted in her disappearance from foster care. But that's ... double quotes Grace started. Legally brilliant. Lance finished grimly. If he can prove any contact between you and Emma after she left foster care, he can claim you kidnapped her. And Preston Scavo isn't just gathering evidence for the criminal. Casey's been hired to physically recover Emma and deliver her to her stepfather's attorneys. Emma had gone white. So this isn't just about finding me. It's about taking me. Today, if possible, Lance confirmed. According to my sources, they have a court order for emergency removal pending. Based on claims that Emma is in immediate danger from an unfit guardian, the room was silent except for the ticking of my mother's grandfather clock. Outside, we could hear a car engine idling on the road. What are our options? I asked. Lance pulled out legal documents from his briefcase. Dr. Clive faxed these over an hour ago. Emergency petition for custody, expert testimony about Emma's psychological state, documentation of the ongoing threat from her stepfather. It's good, really good. But we need to get to court before they execute their removal order. Right now, they're sitting outside, waiting for us to move. My mother, who had been listening to this exchange with growing anger, stood up and walked to the window. The black sedan was still there, parked just beyond the property line. How many of them do you think there are? She asked. Probably just Scavo and one associate, Lance replied. Why? Kelly smiled, and it wasn't a particularly nice smile, because I just remembered something. My neighbor Jake Clive raises cattle on the property next door, and Jake really doesn't like strangers parking on his road without permission. If summoned by her words, a massive pickup truck appeared on the road, pulling a cattle trailer. Why, it stopped directly behind the black sedan, effectively blocking it in. A man in coveralls emerged from the truck and walked to the sedan's driver. Window. Even from a distance, we could see him gesturing angrily at the car. That's Jake, my mother said with satisfaction. He's about to explain to those gentlemen that they're trespassing on private property and interfering with his cattle operation. Will that hold them? Parker asked. Long enough, Lance said, already pulling out his phone. Martinez, if we can get an emergency hearing this afternoon, ... Do it, Grace said firmly. Whatever it takes. Emma looked at all of us. Grace, me, Parker, Lance, my mother, and I saw something change in her expression. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked like a teenager who believed that adults might actually be able to protect her. Are we really going to fight this? She asked. We're really going to fight this, I confirmed. Outside, Jake Clive was still lecturing the occupants of the sedan, while my mother watched from the window with grim satisfaction. It wasn't much of a reprieve, but it was enough. We had work to do. Lance's phone call to Judge Martinez lasted exactly 12 minutes. And when he hung up, his expression told us everything we needed to know. We got it, he said. It's emergency hearing. At 4 o'clock this afternoon, but there's a catch. There's always a catch, Emma said dryly. Emma's stepfather's attorney filed a motion this morning claiming that Grace has been in violation of a restraining order that was issued as part of the original custody case. They're arguing that any contact between Grace and Emma after the failed reunification constitutes contempt of court. Grace went white. What restraining order? I was never served with any restraining order. Lance pulled out his phone and showed. USA document. According to this, a judge issued a temporary restraining order 6 months ago, preventing you from having any contact with Emma or her family. It was supposed to be served at your Portland address, but I'd already moved by then, Grace said. I never received this, which is probably exactly what they were counting on, Lance replied. If you violated a court order unknowingly, it still looks like violation to a judge. Emma had been reading over Lance's shoulder. This is dated 2 days before I called. Grace from the group home. They filed this to make sure that if Grace helped me, she'd be breaking the law. Thought it's a setup, Parker said. They planned this whole thing. I was studying the document when something caught my eye. Lance, look at the signature on this motion, the attorney who filed it. Lance squinted at the screen. David Scavo, Esquire. That's interesting. Preston's brother? I asked. Our cousin? Family business, apparently. They've been running this kind of operation for years, using the legal system to intimidate and control abuse victims. My mother, who had been listening from the kitchen doorway, set down her coffee cup hard enough to make everyone jump. These people are professional predators. What does this mean for our hearing? Grace asked. It means we need Dr. Clive here. In person, Lance said. Her testimony has to be compelling enough to override the restraining order violation. And it means Emma needs to be prepared to testify about why she contacted Grace despite the legal risk. Emma nodded. I can do that. Grace said gently, testifying means telling the judge everything. About your stepfather, about what he did, about why you ran away. Are you ready for that? I've been ready for that since the day he put me in the hospital. Lance's phone buzzed with a text. He read it and frowned. Dr. Clive just landed at the regional airport, renting a car and driving straight to the courthouse. But there's something else. ... What now? I asked. She's not coming alone. Apparently she's bringing Emma's mother. The room went dead silent. Emma's face had gone ashen. My mother, Emma whispered. She's here. Dr. Clive says she contacted your mother yesterday, explained the situation. Your mother wants to testify. On your behalf. Emma started shaking. No. She chose him over me. She blamed me for everything that happened. She can't just show up now and pretend she cares. Grace immediately moved to Emma's side. Breathe. We don't know why. She's here. Maybe. Maybe what? Emma's voice was rising. Maybe she's had a change of heart. Maybe she suddenly realizes that her husband was beating her daughter. She knew Grace. She knew what he was doing, and she let it happen because it was easier than standing. Up to him, I'd never seen Emma this angry, this raw. All her careful control was gone, placed by the fury of a child who'd been abandoned by the person who was supposed to protect her. Emma, Lance said carefully, legally speaking. If your mother is willing to testify that Grace's actions were necessary to protect you, it could be huge. A biological parent supporting an unofficial guardian arrangement. She forfeited the right to call herself my parent when she chose him over me, Emma said flatly. Parker, who had been quiet during this exchange, spoke up. What if we don't let her testify? What if we just focus on Dr. Clive's testimony and the documentation? We could, Lance said, but if she's already here, the other side finds out she's available to testify and we didn't call her, it could look like we're hiding something. My mother had been watching Emma during this conversation, and now she walked over and sat down beside her. Sweetheart, can I tell you something? Emma nodded, wiping angry tears from her eyes. When I was about your age, my father left our family. She packed up one day and disappeared. My mother spent the next 2 years blaming me for driving him away, telling me that if I'd been a better daughter, he would have stayed. Emma looked up at Kelly with surprise. What happened? What happened was that I spent 20 years hating. Both of them, him for leaving, her for blaming me. And you know what I learned? Hate is exhausting. It takes up so much space in your heart that there's no room left for anything else. So you forgave them? No, my mother said simply. I stopped letting them live in my head rent-free. There's a difference. Emma was quiet for a moment, processing this. I think I should let her testify. I think you should do whatever feels right to you, but remember, this isn't about her anymore. It's about your future, about making sure you stay safe and stay with Grace. Lance's phone rang again. He answered it, listened for a moment, then covered the speaker. It's Dr. Clive. She's at the courthouse with Emma's mother. They want to know if we can meet them there an hour early to go over testimony. Everyone looked at Emma. The decision was hers. Emma took a deep breath, and when she spoke, her voice was steady again. Tell them we'll be there. But I want to talk to my mother alone first, just for 5 minutes. Are you sure? Grace asked. I'm sure. I need to look at her and ask her one question. If she can answer it honestly, then maybe she can help us. If she can, toed double quotes. Emma shrugged. At least I'll know where we stand. What question? I asked. Emma's eyes were dry now, but there was something in them that looked like steel. I want to ask her if she knew. She really truly knew what he was doing to me, and she chose to do nothing. Because if she admits that, if she's finally ready to be honest about it, then maybe we can work together. But if she's still lying to herself, still making excuses, then I don't want her anywhere near this courtroom. Lance nodded. It's fair. And Emma. Whatever she says, whatever happens. In that conversation, it doesn't change anything about our case. You're still brave, you're still strong, and you still deserve to be safe. I know, Emma said quietly. For the first time in my life, I actually know that. Outside, Jake Clive was still keeping the sedan blocked in, but I could see the occupants. Getting restless, time was running out. We need to go, I said. All of us, together. As we prepared to leave for what could be the most important court hearing of our lives, I found myself thinking about families, the ones we're born into, the ones we choose, and the ones we fight to protect. Emma had lost the family she'd been born into, but she'd found something better, people who would risk everything to keep her safe. Whatever happened in that courtroom, we were going to face it together. The courthouse steps felt steeper than they should have as we climbed them together. Emma walked between Grace and me, her shoulders set with determination but her hands shaking slightly. Behind us, Lance carried a briefcase full of documents that would either save Emma's future or destroy it. Dr. Sarah Clive was waiting in the lobby, exactly as I'd pictured her, tall, authoritative, with silver hair and the kind of presence that commanded respect. But it was the woman standing beside her that made Emma stop walking altogether. Emma's mother looked smaller than I'd expected, worn down by years of making impossible choices. She had Emma's dark hair and eyes, but where? Emma radiated strength despite her trauma. Her mother seemed fragile, like she might break if someone spoke too loudly. Emma, her mother said, her voice barely above a whisper. Emma stared at her for a long moment, then walked forward until they were standing face to face. I have one question for you, and I need you to answer it honestly. Mother nodded, tears already starting to fall. Did you know? Emma asked. When he was hurting me, when he was coming into my room at night, when he was hitting me for things that weren't my fault, did you know what was happening? The lobby went silent. Even the other people waiting for their cases seemed to sense the weight of this moment. Emma's mother closed her eyes, took a shuddering breath, and when she opened them again, she looked directly at her daughter. Yes, I knew. Why didn't you stop him? Because I was a coward. Because I was afraid he'd leave, and I didn't know how to survive without him. Because I told myself that if I just kept you quiet, if I just made sure you didn't make him angry, maybe it would stop. Emma nodded slowly. Thank you. For what? For finally being honest. Dr. Clive stepped forward then, her professional composure intact, but her eyes soft as she looked at Emma. Are you ready for this, sweetheart? I'm ready. The hearing itself was unlike anything I'd expected. Judge Martinez was a woman in her 50s with gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see right through any attempt at deception. She listened as Lance presented our case. As Dr. Clive testified about Emma's psychological state and the ongoing danger from her stepfather, when Emma took the stand, she spoke with a clarity and strength that made my chest tight with pride. She explained why she'd contacted Grace, why she'd chosen to stay with her instead of remaining in foster care. She believed her safety depended on remaining with the woman who had become her family. "Ms. Clive," Judge Martinez said when Emma finished, "you understand that what Ms. Whitman did was technically illegal?" "Yes, Your Honor. But I also understand that sometimes doing the right thing and doing the legal thing aren't the same thing." The stepfather's attorney tried to paint Grace as an unstable influence, tried to argue that Emma had been manipulated into believing she was in danger. But when Emma's mother took the stand and confirmed everything Emma had said when she testified, that Grace had done what she herself had failed to do, protect Emma, their case fell apart. "Ms. Whitman," Judge Martinez said finally, approached the bench. Grace stood on unsteady legs and walked forward. I held my breath. "What you did was illegal," the judge said. "You interfered with a custody order, you harbored a minor without authorization, and you violated a restraining order, even if unknowingly." Grace nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." However, the judge continued, "The evidence suggests that your actions were motivated by genuine concern for Emma's welfare, that Emma has thrived in your care, and that returning her to her previous situation would not be in her best interests." She paused, looking over her glasses at the packed courtroom. "Dr. Clive, your petition for emergency custody is granted. Emma will be placed in your temporary care while permanent arrangements are made. Ms. Whitman, given the extraordinary circumstances and Emma's clear preference to remain with you, I'm recommending that you be considered as a potential permanent guardian, pending completion of the proper legal procedures." The courtroom erupted. Emma burst into tears, not of sadness, but of relief. Grace looked like she might faint. I felt like I could breathe for the first time in weeks, but Judge Martinez wasn't finished. "Mr. Scavo," she said, addressing Emma's stepfather's attorney, "your client's behavior in this matter has been reprehensible. Hiring investigators to intimidate a child, attempting to manipulate the legal system for personal gain, and failing to acknowledge his role in creating this situation, I'm ordering a full investigation into his conduct and recommending that the district attorney review this case for possible criminal charges." As we left the courthouse, Emma was flanked by both Grace and Dr. Clive, the three of them already, discussing living arrangements and school transfers and all the practical details of building a legal life together. "What happens now?" I asked Lance as we walked down the steps. "Now the real work begins," he said. "Paperwork, home studies, making everything official. Oliver, what you all did here today, ... it was extraordinary." Emma stopped walking and turned back to me. "Oliver, yeah, thank you. For everything. For fixing the sink. For staying for dinner. For not running when things got complicated. Thank you for letting me be part of your family." She smiled, the first completely unreserved smile I'd seen from her. "What now? Do you think there are any pipes that need fixing at Dr. Clive's house?" I laughed. "I hope so. Someone needs to keep an eye on you troublemakers." As we walked away from the courthouse together, all of us, the family we'd chosen and fought for and protected, I realized that sometimes the most important repairs aren't to pipes or fences or broken appliances. Sometimes they're too broken. Trust, broken hearts, and broken systems. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get to be part of putting something beautiful back together. 3 months later, I was back in a kitchen, fixing a sink. But this time, it was Dr. Sarah Clive's kitchen. Done, in a house that had become home to both Emma and Grace through a legal arrangement that nobody could have predicted. "The disposal is making that grinding noise again," Emma called from the living room, where she was doing homework at a table by the window. "The one that sounds like it's angry about something." "His disposals are always angry about something," I called back, reaching for my wrench. "It's their natural state." Grace appeared in the doorway, carrying 2 cups of coffee, the good kind. I'd learned to distinguish. "Any prognosis, doctor?" "Well, the patient will live, but she needs a new impeller. Probably chewed up something she shouldn't have." I accepted the coffee gratefully. "Speaking of which, has Emma been putting things down there that don't belong? Only ice cubes, Grace said. She read somewhere that it helps sharpen the blades. That's actually not wrong. Your ward is getting entirely too smart for her own. Good, our ward, Grace corrected automatically. And I felt that familiar warmth in my chest. The custody arrangement had been unusual, but it worked. Dr. Clive had official guardianship, which satisfied the legal requirements and gave Emma the family connection she needed. But Grace remained Emma's day-to-day caregiver. The person who helped with homework and worried about curfews and knew exactly how Emma liked her grilled cheese sandwiches. And somehow, I had become the guy who fixed things when they broke. And stayed for dinner most nights, Oliver. Emma's voice came from the living room. Can you come here for a minute? I want to show you something. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and walked into the living room, where Emma was sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by college brochures. 16, she was already thinking about her future in ways that amazed me. Look at this, she said, holding up a glossy pamphlet. Portland State has a program where you can study social work and psychology at the same time. Dr. Clive thinks. I should apply for early admission. You want to be a social worker? Sitting down on the couch. I want to be the kind of social worker Grace was. It's the kind who fights for kids instead of just following procedures. She picked up another brochure. But I also want to understand why people hurt the people they're supposed to love. Maybe if I can figure that out, I can help prevent it. Grace had joined us, settling onto the couch beside me. You don't have to choose your whole career based on what happened to you. I'm not, Emma said firmly. I'm choosing it based on what I learned from you. That sometimes one person who cares enough to break the rules can change everything. I found myself thinking about that first day, when I'd come to fix a simple plumbing problem and walked into the middle of a situation that changed all our lives. How Grace's willingness to risk everything for Emma had created something none of us could have imagined. Besides, Emma continued, grinning at me, I figure I'll need someone to fix all the sinks in the group homes and foster houses I'll be working with. Know anyone who might be interested in that kind of job? I might know a guy, I said solemnly, though he's getting old and his knees creak when he crawls under sinks. Perfect. Old guys with creaky knees are more trustworthy. Dr. Clive appeared in the doorway, having just returned from the hospital. She'd made the 3-hour drive from Portland every weekend for the past 3 months, slowly building a relationship with Emma that was both professional and personal. How's my favorite family of troublemakers? She asked, loosening her tie. Emma's planning to take over the social services system, Grace said. Oliver's enabling her by promising to provide maintenance support. Excellent. Someone needs to shake things up. Dr. Clive looked around the living room, taking in the comfortable chaos of homework and coffee cups and family photos that had accumulated over the past few months. You know, I have to admit, when I first agreed to this arrangement, I wasn't sure it would work. What changed your mind? I asked. Watching Emma laugh, she said simply. Really laugh, not just polite social laughing. The first time I heard her crack up at one of your terrible jokes, Oliver, I knew we'd gotten it right. Emma's phone buzzed with a text, and she glanced at it before rolling her eyes. Parker wants to know if we're still coming to his graduation party next weekend. Are we? Grace asked. Of course. Someone needs to keep him humble when he gets his social work degree. Emma paused. Plus, I want to introduce Dr. Clive to him. I think they'd like each other. Always matchmaking, I observed. Someone in this family needs to have good relationship instincts, Emma shot back. Grace and I exchanged glances. We'd been dancing around the obvious for months now, both of us afraid to name what had developed between us for fear of disrupting Emma's stability. But lately, the pretense was getting harder to maintain. Speaking of relationships, Dr. Clive said carefully, I have some news that might affect our living situation. We all turned to look at her. The hospital has offered me a position here. Department head, developing a new pediatric trauma program. I could move here permanently, buy a house big enough for all of us. ... Talk, she paused. If that's something you'd all want. Emma looked at Grace, then at me, then back at Dr. Clive. You mean we could all stay together? Officially? If that's what? everyone wants. The silence stretched for a moment, filled with possibility. I think, Grace said slowly, that sounds like the best kind of family plan I've ever heard. Emma jumped up from the floor and threw her arms around Dr. Clive, then Grace, then me. This is really happening, isn't it? We're really going to be a family. We already are a family, I said, pulling her close, and we're just going to make it official. Later that evening, after Dr. Clive had gone to her hotel, and Emma had gone upstairs to call her friend Felicia about college applications, Grace and I sat on the front porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. Can you believe how far we've come? Grace asked, her hand finding mine on the porch swing. From fixing a sink to fixing a family, I said. Not bad for a Tuesday. She laughed, the sound as warm and familiar as coming home. What do you think happens next? I looked through the window at Emma, bent over her homework at the kitchen table, safe and loved, and planning a future that would help other kids like her. I thought about Dr. Clive's job offer, about the house we'd start looking for together, about Parker's graduation and Emma's college applications, and all the ordinary, extraordinary moments that make up a life. I think, I said, squeezing Grace's hand, we keep building. One day, one repair, one choice at a time. Think we're up for it? I kissed her temple, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and the promise of tomorrow. Grace, we've handled plumbing emergencies, legal crises, and a teenager with strong opinions about sandwich construction. I think we can handle anything. From inside the house, Emma called out, "Are you two being gross and romantic out there? Because I can see you through the window and it's very disturbing." Grace and I looked at each other and started laughing, as Grace called back, "We're being gross and romantic. Deal with it." "Fine," Emma replied. "I'm making hot chocolate. And if you want some, you have to come inside and act normal." "Oh, deal," I said, standing and offering Grace my hand. "Come on. Let's go be normal." As we walked into the house together, into the warmth and light and beautiful chaos of the family we'd built from broken pieces, I realized that sometimes the best repairs are the ones you never planned to make. 2 years later, I found myself standing in the kitchen of our new house, mine and Grace's and Emma's and Dr. Clive's, watching Emma pack boxes for college. She was 18 now, confident in a way that still took my breath away, getting ready to start her freshman year at Portland State with a full scholarship and a clear sense of purpose. "Are you sure you packed enough books?" Grace asked, surveying the tower of boxes by the front door. Emma said, and the words still made Grace's eyes light up every time. "I'm going to college, not colonizing Mars. They have libraries there. Don't mom me, young lady, and libraries don't have your comfort books. What if you can't sleep and need to read something familiar?" I caught Dr. Clive's eye, and we both smiled. Grace had officially adopted Emma 6 months ago, and she'd thrown herself into the role of worried mother with the same intensity she'd once brought to social work. "Speaking of which," Dr. Clive said, pulling an envelope from her purse, "I have something for you, Em." Emma opened the envelope and pulled out a letter on official hospital letterhead. As she read it, her face broke into a grin that could have powered the whole house. "They approved my internship application," she said. "I'll be working in the pediatric trauma unit next summer, following in the family footsteps," I said. "All of our footsteps," Emma corrected. "Social work from Grace, medical knowledge from Dr. Clive, and practical problem solving from you." "What did I contribute to your career path?" I asked, genuinely curious. "You taught me that sometimes the most important thing you can do is just show up and not leave when things get complicated." Grace wrapped her arms around me from behind, resting her chin on my shoulder. "That's a pretty good life philosophy." Finished taping up her last box and turned to face us. "You know, when I was 15 and hiding in that library every day, I used to imagine what it would feel like to have a real family. I thought it would be calm and perfect and maybe a little boring. And instead, you got us," Dr. Clive said dryly. "Instead, I got chaos and laughter and people who fight about the right way to load a dishwasher, but would also burn down the world to protect each other." Emma's voice got softer. "It's so much better than perfect." Parker chose that moment too. Arrive with the moving truck, now sporting a graduate degree and a job at the local family services office. Ready to ship our favorite college freshman off to her bright future? As ready as we'll ever be, Grace said, though I could hear the tears she was trying to hold back, as we loaded Emma's life into boxes and carried them out to the truck. Found myself thinking about that first day, about the simple plumbing job that had led to the most complicated and rewarding few years of my life. "Oliver," Emma called from the truck, "do you remember what you said that first night? When I asked if you'd really come back to fix things?" "I said I would." "You said you hated leaving jobs half-finished." She grinned at me. "Well, this job isn't finished yet. I'm going to need someone to fix the pipes in all those group homes. And foster houses I'll be working with someday. Is that a job offer? It's a family promise?" I looked around at Grace, Dr. Clive, Parker, and Emma, my chosen family. A complicated, beautiful, sometimes chaotic family, and felt that familiar warmth in my chest. "Then I guess I'd better keep my tools sharp," I said. "Good," Emma said, climbing into the truck. "Because I have a feeling we're going to change the world, one broken pipe at a time." As the truck pulled away, carrying Emma toward her future, Grace slipped her hand into mine. "Think she'll be okay? I think she'll be extraordinary." "Think we'll be okay? Empty nesters and all that?" I turned to look at the woman who had risked everything to save a child, who had taught me that love sometimes means breaking rules, and that family is something you build rather than something you're born into. "Grace," I said, "we've survived plumbing emergencies, custody battles, and a teenager with very strong opinions about grilled cheese construction. I think we can handle whatever comes next. Even if what comes next involves Dr. Clive moving in permanently and turning us into a 3-generation household. Especially that." She smiled and kissed me, and in that moment, standing in front of the house we'd bought together, watching our daughter drive toward her dreams, I realized that sometimes the best repairs are the ones that never really end. Sometimes they just keep growing, one connection at a time, into something strong enough to last forever. I was just fixing plumbing. That's all it was supposed to be. But sometimes life has other plans, and sometimes those plans are better than anything you could have imagined. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.